The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 6th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I came across this picture on Facebook the other day. It was all these cars that were stopped at a traffic light in this intersection. But in the midst of all these cars were also a bunch of people. Some were standing around, some were working together on something. And the caption of this picture said that an older gentleman's electric scooter fell off of its trailer at a stoplight, and instead of driving around and honking, everyone threw on their hazards and hopped out to help. A bunch of the comments, as you may imagine, said things like, "Finally, this restores my faith in humanity. There are still some good people in this world." Someone said, "What a great example of people's light and love that is shining through." I think it says something about our world when this situation of being nice becomes viral and newsworthy. I feel like Jesus told a story about this once too. But then later, I came across an article where 40 people were involved in this huge all-out fight at a Golden Corral, with food being thrown, and then plates, and then chairs, and then tables being thrown, reportedly because they had run out of steak on the buffet. All right, that is the news I was expecting. Okay. I can't handle all that niceness stuff. That's just too hopeful right there. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Here we are still near the beginning of Jesus' ministry in the Gospel of Luke. We've watched and heard as Jesus has been on this countrywide tour of synagogues, preaching and teaching. He's gone from town to town, healing the sick and bringing wholeness to those who are broken. He's attracted crowds. He's called disciples. He's shown the multitudes the might of God's power and love. And now he's showing them and showing us what it means to live as a disciple, a follower of Jesus in this kingdom of God. If you remember the story from last week, Jesus had just come down from the mountainside with his freshly chosen disciples. He stands on a level place, and the crowds are swarming in on him for more healings and more cures. And in the midst of this incredible show of power of Jesus healing and curing, he looks up at the disciples and shares the words of the Beatitudes, where he says, "Blessed are you who are poor and hungry and who weep and who are hated. And woe to you who are rich and full and laughing and spoken well of." The very next thing Jesus says after those Beatitudes is what we hear in today's gospel lesson. "Blessed are you, woe to you, but I say to you that listen, to love your enemies, and do good to those who hate you, and bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you." In the very same vein as those blessings and woes, these seemingly simple statements, and nearly everything else that follows in this passage, are radical. And they're a little ridiculous, but they're some of the most important things that Jesus says about how we are called to live. I'd have to believe that most, if not all of us, believe that these kinds of sentiments are at the core of what it means to be Christian, right? I always think back to Matthew's gospel, where when Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment is, he says, greatest thing to do, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. That's who we are, right? We're people of love. We're people who are supposed to show care and compassion and kindness. They'll know we are Christians by our love. Right? It's love. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Love. Or maybe I should also say, easier said than done. Or maybe that's where this whole do as I say, not as I do comes into play as well. Because again, we live in this world where the news of a group of Good Samaritans in traffic is more surprising than a news of a 40-person brawl over a buffet. We live in a world where muttering a curse is much simpler than opening our ears to hear a different opinion. We live in a world where our political discourse is basically who can yell the loudest. And if I don't agree with you, I'm going to put up a flag that says, screw this person and screw you too. And don't think our kids aren't watching and learning from that. To love your enemies, to do good to those who hate you, to bless those who curse you, to pray for those who abuse you, as I said, is radical. It's ridiculous. It's one of the most important things we can do in this world. And it is not easy. It may not make you a lot of friends, and it may come with a sentence of getting hung on a cross. Maybe you've heard of a man named Daryl Davis. He was born in the late 50s, and he was the son of a U.S. Foreign Service officer, which meant that as he grew up, he was living in many different countries. When Daryl was 10 years old in the mid-60s, his family moved back to the United States. And like many children his age, he joined the Cub Scouts. And he tells this story where his Cub Scout pack was invited to march in a local parade, and Daryl was asked to carry the flag to lead his pack down the parade route. But as he and his pack were marching down the parade route, suddenly he realized he was being struck with rocks and bottles and any other trash that could be found on the side of the curb. It was all being thrown by the crowd who was gathered there for the parade. I haven't mentioned yet that Daryl said he was the only black child in his Cub Scout pack. At first, he thought maybe the crowds just didn't like the Cub Scouts. He said it wasn't until he got home that when his parents were cleaning and bandaging his wounds, and he asked them why this would have happened. Why don't they like the Scouts? His parents had to sit him down and explain to him. He said for the first time what racism was. Daryl said he didn't believe his parents in that moment that when they were telling him this. And his question to his parents right then was one that he would hold on to and would shape the work for the rest of his life. He said, "Why would they hate me if they know nothing about me?" As I said earlier, you may have heard of Daryl Davis before, and if you do, it may be because of one of two reasons. For one thing, he's a famous musician who's known for playing blues and R&B and boogie-woogie piano. He's backed up musicians like Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis and B.B. King. He's made an incredible name for himself as a jazz musician. The other reason you may have heard him before is through his work as an author and an activist. As his life continued, in an effort to answer that lifelong question he had of why do you hate me when you know nothing about me, he said he wanted to go right to the heart of that hatred that he experienced. And he went and met with the Ku Klux Klan. And through a few tense meetings between himself and the Klan leaders, he eventually befriended and became best friends with the Imperial Wizard of the KKK in Maryland. It was a relationship that led that Klan leader, Roger Kelly, to ask Daryl himself to be his daughter's godfather. Davis has been credited with being directly responsible for, they say, between 40 and 60 people, and probably indirectly responsible for over 200 people leaving the Klan. All because they got to know somebody that they believed was an enemy. I could go on and on about that story. I encourage you to go home and look up Daryl Davis and his TED Talk in particular to hear more of that story. But that story reminds me that these instructions, these commands from Jesus are not easy. They are not expected. They don't bring immediate results. Getting to know someone we don't know or who is different from us or who we disagree with, that's not how we've been trained to think or work. But again, we hear that God's kingdom is not like this world. Jesus' life and ministry has turned everything upside down. And so if we are going to become disciples and live in the way that Jesus calls us, Jesus is telling us that we have to change. Yes, you, me. As I've been thinking about these words from Jesus, I can't get that old hymn out of my head. Probably know that one that says, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with you." Is that how it goes, right? I mean, that's how it goes. It has to be, because only if you guys would change, or if our enemies would change, or if that other person would change, then we can have peace, right? It's certainly not me who has to change. No. What is it? Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. There's good news. These are the times in our life with God where we get to be selfish. We have to be selfish. Because maybe this needs to be said, maybe it doesn't, but we can't change other people, right? We've tried that already, and we can see how that's gone for us. Instead, with God as our source of peace and hope and love, we start with ourselves. We change ourselves in order that God's love and peace and hope can be spread through us. These are tough words. And as always, there's often nuance and context that is needed, especially in Jesus' words about abuse. Because he says that we are to pray for those who abuse you and forgive as we wish to be forgiven. But too often I have heard people use these verses to say that it's okay when there's abuse, just pretend it didn't happen. I think the last thing Jesus would tell us that is, if you are mistreated or abused, that it's okay and just get over it. No, in these words, the abuser still faces consequences in their own judgment. We offer prayer, and through God, our relationships can be redeemed. Like I said, these statements are radical. They're pretty darn ridiculous. But they're some of the most important instructions as Jesus' disciples that we may ever receive. With God by our side, I think that even we can show this kind of love to one another. We too can be merciful because it was God our Father who was first merciful to us. And somehow, despite these tough words and these tough challenges, I think we can still find it in us to say, thanks be to God. Amen.